This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Let's talk about content anxiety syndrome. What I'm referring to here is this constant pressure that so many people put on themselves these days around creating content. Must create content. Now, content anxiety syndrome, otherwise known as CAS, is a relatively new player on the block of mental health disorders. And it's a term I made up. I'll be honest. I made it up to describe what too many amazing people experience in today's hashtag hustle culture. Again, that relentless pressure to create and post content. Reasons people create and post content. They do it for business, for personal branding, for being relevant, for remaining relevant, for search engine optimization, for backlinks. Now, since coming online in 2008, 14 years ago, I have had many deep conversations with professionals about content. I've had those conversations here on the Play Your Position podcast. The role content plays in our digital lives and the role it plays in our personal lives. A perennial question about content comes up again and again. Which is best? People want to know. Is it quality or is it quantity? Should I post fewer things that are of higher quality or more things just to be constantly feeding that content monster? And that debate is evergreen. The anxiety it generates is real. Yeah, the pressure to create content is real. Other frequently asked questions I've heard over the years about content creation include: how much content do I need to create? When I create content, how often do I post what I make? Who's watching? Who's liking my stuff? Does anyone even care? I have asked myself these questions over the years, and over the years I have battled with CAS right next to the best of them, to the point of burnout. And I love to create. I am a creator to my soul. I just love making things. And I'm not just talking about digital things like this podcast or my blog over at maryloukaiser.com or memes or anything like that. I'm talking about, I love to cook. I like to sew. I like to paint. I like to put outfits together. I like to help other people rearrange their rooms and do that interior decorating thing. I'm just a creator, right? When the internet came along and I got into the internet game again around 2008, the pressure I put on myself for so many years, way too long, to keep up with what exactly, right? What exactly was I trying to keep up with? Well, that pressure had me tied up in knots. It gave me headaches. It took me away from my friends and my family. My kids used to say, "Mom, get off the computer. Get away from the computer." Because this content, this feeling I had that I needed to constantly be creating more content, it kept me in front of my laptop way too long, hours and hours at a time. It had me on edge with the constant fear that I wasn't doing enough. Now, if you didn't know that I was talking about content creation just now, you might think I described having an addiction to drugs or alcohol, the headaches, removing myself from friends and family, keeping me kind of, secluded away. What was I up to? And in some ways I did. This pressure to create content has some eerie similarities to addiction in general. Addicted to the results that we tell ourselves this content is going to bring us. And This creates artificial expectations, right? This again, invisible voice coming from where is what generates the content anxiety syndrome in the first place. And this disorder plagues too many good people who fall for artificial promises and expectations about what creating content can do for them with its harrowing #hustle pressure. Now, creating content in and of itself is not bad. The reality is we are all content creators these days to one degree or another. With our lives online as well as off, content is a piece of this puzzle. As a writer, as a podcaster, I am geared towards creating content. Artists who play in other media create content as well. So do thought leaders, athletes, entrepreneurs, scientists, subject matter experts. Sometimes we are creating solely for ourselves. In the early days of an entrepreneurial idea or venture, we tend to keep that content that we create behind closed doors. When you're starting a new book or your first book, you usually keep that under wraps for a while. You're not shouting from the rooftops, I just wrote my first paragraph. Although some people do that because that in and of itself, that documentation is a form of content. I mean, who am I kidding? I see this all the time on the socials, right? Now, there comes a point with our content when we choose to share what we create. We put it out there. It's easier than ever these days to do that with access to publishing platforms online. More of us choose to share what we create. We put our work out there for anyone to find. I think if you have a healthy relationship with content creation, your expectations are level and within reason. This idea that you're going to post one video on YouTube and it's going to go viral and it's going to generate all these leads for your blossoming, flower arranging business or whatever. I mean, I'll use myself as an example. This idea that if I consistently create high value content, what are my expectations around that? Well, when I set out to do this podcast back in early 2014, I actually began planning it in 2013. I knew from what I had read about podcasting that it was a long game and that if I was going to do it, I really needed to come to the medium with realistic expectations, to do it for the love of it, to do it for the process. And I'll tell you, that is how it has served me. I'm a better thinker. I'm a much better interviewer. I'm able to articulate my thoughts in ways that had I not been podcasting for all these years, I don't know if I would have reached this level. And I still have a lot to learn. I'm learning constantly. I study the air quote greats. I read a lot. I pay attention to what people are talking about online. And I share my episodes because I know that there are people listening and reading who need and want to hear or read what I have to say. And I know I'm probably never going to be at the level of a Brene Brown, for example, or Joe Rogan. But I also have to keep in mind that people like that have been building their audience for a long, long, long time. And there is an element of serendipity for any content creator. Going back to the viral video thing, in the early days of YouTube, that happened more often because there just wasn't the volume of content on the channel. So people had a higher probability if they made a video that was extremely funny or weird or informative, it had a higher probability of going air quote viral. Very difficult to achieve that today, simply because there's so much out there. And the channels have become more sophisticated, as have people who are behind putting videos out. So I say these things because if you're someone who creates content or has been thinking about creating content and you're wondering, well, who am I doing this for? That's part of the process and that's, I think, comes into this content anxiety syndrome. If you're not clear about why you're creating content, what are you hoping it's going to do for you, how are you approaching it, then your expectations could be unrealistic. And then when you don't get the results that you thought you were going to get, like, for example, you thought, oh, this video is so funny, it's going to go viral. Well, and then it didn't. So are you going to let that stop you from creating more? Well, that does happen to a lot of people. And when we choose to share what we create, the art that we've made, video, podcast, book, painting, athletic performance, whatever, it no longer belongs to us. It belongs to the public. And that in and of itself can generate anxiety if the creator hasn't taken the time to reflect on, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And, am I doing it for myself? Am I doing it for a very specific result, which honestly, we can't control. We like to think we can. I've had conversations on this show with marketers who laugh when companies come to them and say, well, this is what we want. And they have a laundry list of demands about results. And they just throw up their arms and go, a good marketer can't promise any of those results. Like you're going to get, 20% greater lead generation if you do this one kind of campaign and stuff. I mean, we are all making this up as we go along. And yes, there is a growing mountain of data that people are studying and learning about online behaviors when it comes to content consumption and conversion, right? At the end of the day, conversion is what most people who create content are after. They want more followers, more likes, more engagement, more leads, more business, more money. And that's honest. That is honest. They want more exposure. They want more people to know about something they've done, like written a book or produced a film or started a new business, have a new offering. We're all playing this game with content. But if the content conversation generates anxiety, it's time to ask different questions. Instead of following the masses, more of us perhaps need to ask what the pressure to create and post so much content is costing us. Is it giving us the results we seek? Are we buying into an agenda we didn't create, but feel the need to follow? Are we merely looking for the next dopamine hit to our ego? That's a fair question. Another fair question is content still king? You may be familiar with this phrase. I was curious about where it started, and we can thank Bill Gates of Microsoft for coining the phrase content is king back in 1996. And why not? He saw where the world was heading with the advent of the internet. And think of the stake he had in promoting the idea of content is king. That line has served him very well. But 26 years later, is content still king? I mean, this is a question I have. Can we honestly say that constantly creating and posting content helps us become healthier, wealthier, thinner, happier, any of the ers you want to put on the end of a word, right? Is it only pouring rocket fuel on our growing anxiety about how much and what kind of content we believe we need to create? Perhaps we'd be better served by a different question. What's the context of the content we create and ultimately consume? Because we're not just, if you're in business or a career of any kind, you are probably primarily a content consumer and secondly, a content creator. We consume way more content than we create. So could contextual thinking mitigate the nasty side effects of creating and sharing so much content? Why are we creating so much content anyway? I remember, before the pandemic, there was consistently put out into the social channels these 30-day challenges, these 60-day challenges. And somebody somewhere came up with it and people would buy in and say, okay, I'm going to write a blog post for 30 days. I did one of those back in, I want to say 2015. It could have been earlier. It was definitely a while ago. I just wanted to see what happened. And I'll tell you, it was intense coming up with things to write about, sitting down in front of the laptop, opening up my website's dashboard and, going through all the motions of that. And then in turn, promoting what I'd done. It was really interesting. And I've seen people have variations of this challenge. And at the end of the day, I, measured my results. I did everything that the challenge said to do. And in all fairness, there were, as far as growing my business, there was no immediate result, but it wasn't a waste of time. It put me into a rhythm. I developed a routine. I sharpened my writing skills. I was able to, again, I generated a lot of 30 different blog posts, and it definitely informed me about the direction I wanted to take my personal life and my professional life as well. So managing this anxiety that naturally comes up from pressure we put on ourselves for any kind of thing, and this is specifically on creating content. One way of managing and even eliminating content anxiety syndrome altogether is taking a step back and thinking about what we're doing. Good old reflection. It really works. Perspective is key. Measure what you just experienced. If you take a challenge like a 30-day or 60 or 90-day challenge, ask yourself what it did for you. What did you gain? What did you lose? And then you can begin to make some new decisions, some new choices about the direction you want to go. Some people discover they absolutely love it and develop a daily practice, which can turn into a newsletter. There's a man named Jonathan Stark who sends out these short little bursts of emails every single day. And many of them are really just thought-provoking. So you might discover that, hey, I really like this. You might decide, you know what? I don't need to do a daily thing. I like once a month or once a week or whatever. It's a self-discovery process. Once I relaxed about my relationship with creating content, choosing to focus on what rings true for me and not on producing volumes of social filler simply for the sake of posting, my anxiety dissipated. I no longer had headaches. I felt lighter. I was less on edge. I spent more time with my family. And I was, generally speaking, more at peace with the whole content process. I didn't need medication or a detox center. I needed to think differently about the situation. We all have to remember that one day, content platforms like Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, even Apple Podcasts may go away. Anybody remember Vine? Yeah, there were people that had built their entire business on Vine, and when it went down, so did their business. Oof, that's brutal. And we are not in control of these platforms. We are guests, and you gotta always remember that. Now, even if these platforms stick around, they will most definitely change. Think about what's going on with Twitter right now. Twitter is changing. There was a changing of the guard. Elon Musk is now at the helm, and it's not going to be the same. Without a place to share content, I wonder, would we feel as compelled to create so much of it? I doubt it. If the entire conversation around valuable content suddenly went away, people would stop. There'd be no more memes made, all the fake news, all the real news. It's interesting when you think about that. So if leaving content anxiety syndrome behind for good is something, you'd like to do, because again, I know a lot of people have felt anxious about creating and sharing content. First of all, you're not alone. I know all too well the insidious voice inside my head telling me I need to do more, when That's simply not true. I've made peace with that. I've made peace with what, when, and where I create. I know why I'm creating content in the first place, and you can do the same. Be clear about the context of your content. What does it fit into the bigger picture? Be sure about its purpose. It's okay if you don't create or post content all day, every day. Enjoy what you make. Share it if it makes sense. And pretty soon, content anxiety syndrome will be a thing of the past, never to come round again. And that's a really great place to be. So that's it for today, team. Content creation. It's a game we're all playing to one degree or another. And at the end of that day, we are in control of our own pawn. If we're a pawn in this game, we're in control of how we move it around the game board. You've got choices. There's lots of people who are out there, willing to help, that genuinely want you to learn how to do content if it's new to you. If you have a specific kind of content that you want to create, like a book or a podcast, hit me up. I love talking to people about those two specific kinds of content and what they can mean to your business, to your life. It's a fun game to play, but we need to keep perspective. So I look forward to the next episode, which will be a conversation with Ian Robinson, who, oh man, that's a great conversation. So stay tuned for that. That will be dropping soon. In the meantime, team, you know what to do. It is always a great day to get out there and play your position. This is Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.